If you guys have watched the film Clockwork Orange, you'll see how they made Singing in the Rain the song creepy. How about when it's really raining and there's a stalker? Grab a blanket, turn off your lights for 4 of these true scary stories that happened while it was raining. Supernatural force saves me from being abducted. Okay, this happened to me when I was about 14 years old, so back in 2004. My parents and I lived in a rather affluent area, with my high school was known for being the best in our city. During the fall semester, there was a lot of attempted abductions at other high schools near ours, but in the area we were in, none of my friends, me, or anyone's parents were really concerned. Now, I used to walk to and from school. In order to get back home, I would have to cross a street, walk around a roundabout to get to a path in the woods, and then after a kilometer or so, walk through a gate to get onto a street, and finally walk down the rather steep street to my house. This leads me to my story. After school one day in early November, it was raining pretty hard, and I was trying to get out through the crowds as fast as possible to walk home quickly. As I'm crossing the roundabout, I see a brown car pull up to where I usually enter the woods. As I walk by the car, the passenger side window rolls down. He yells, "Hey!" at me, and I turn around to see 2 men sitting in the car. I ignore him, and he yells again, "Get in the car! We can drive you home. It's raining so hard, you might get sick." At this point, I'm thinking nothing of it, just some creeps trying to get my attention, so I shake my head visibly at him and enter into the woods. To this day, I can't explain what happened. As I'm walking through the woods, I literally feel a push from behind me, as if someone used both hands to push me forwards. I turn around and no one is there, but my whole body is screaming, "Run!" I ended up sprinting through the forest, feeling completely freaked out. Although no one is behind me or chasing me, I exit the woods and start running down the street. Halfway down, my umbrella breaks in half. I quickly duck down beside a large truck, and I'm cursing as I'm trying to put it back together. Now, the truck is completely making me invisible to anyone on the street, so you couldn't have been able to see me if you were on the other side of the road or driving in a car. So as I'm crouching beside the truck, I see the bottom of it that a car is driving up the street. My heart stops. The car pulls up to the exit from the woods where I just ran out of, and the 2 men start yelling at each other which direction to run in. The last thing I remember hearing is one of them yelling, "She has to still be in the woods! Go, go, go!" As I see them run into the woods, I grab my broken umbrella and run as fast as humanly possible to my house. I get inside, and for over an hour, I watch through the blinds as they circle around my street, stopping every so often at my house and other houses, trying to see inside. To this day, I think an angel saved my life, and can't even imagine what would have happened had something not pushed me into the woods. So, to the 2 assholes who tried to abduct me, let's not meet. A bad night. I've mentioned in other stories that I was once an addict and lived a pretty self-destructive lifestyle. Well, this incident was one of the catalysts that convinced me to turn my life around. A friend and I were hanging out at our favorite bar on the outskirts of a medium-sized town in Alabama. To begin, it was just the 2 of us and the bar owner, and we were taking turns shooting pool when a man none of us had ever seen before came in and put his quarters on the table, which is a sign that he wants to play the winner. Well, he and I start playing, winner buys a drink, and he seems like a pretty cool guy. At the time, I was 21, and this guy was in his late 30s, so we shot pool for a while, and he offered to pay for mine and my friend's tab that night, so of course he was a-okay with me. He also offered us some Xanax and Lortabs, which should have been a red flag. Who the hell buys a stranger's drinks and just gives them drugs for free? But at the time, I was not one to turn down getting fucked up, especially for free. So by this time, I'm buzzing pretty hard, and he asked if we want to go smoke some pot. Well, yeah, why not? In retrospect, I should have questioned why the fuck he was just trying to get us so wasted. But at the time, I just went along with it. Stupid, I know. Anyways, I remember we hopped into his car, a brand new Audi, and we went off to smoke a joint. We turned down a little used service road that cuts through the Talladega National Forest. I recall wondering why he insisted on going so deep into the forest to smoke a little old joint, but also thinking if this was my car, there'd be no way I would have driven down this narrow, rough dirt road with tree limbs and bushes scraping down the side of the car. I also remember the conversation being very strange and coming to the realization that something was a little off about this guy. The road, which I'd never been down, dead-ended at an open area, almost like a natural cul-de-sac. So we get out and burn a J. My memory gets very hazy at this point, so there's a few crucial details that I wish like hell I could remember, like what exactly the guy and my friend started arguing about. My friend, who was just about as high as I was, can't remember all the details either, but he knows it had to do with something with hooking up. Whatever the argument was about, it almost got physical, so he told the dude to take us back to the bar and load it back up into the car. I faintly recall him mentioning that we shouldn't be so trusting of strangers and saying some other things that really creeped me out. I couldn't wait to get back to the bar and away from this guy. The last thing I remember the guy saying was to let him know if he started to scare us. Then he proceeded to stomp down on the accelerator, and I knew this was going to end bad. Especially since it started raining and I could barely see out the windshield. But due to the benzos, alcohol, and weed, I never really panicked. I then remember there being a 90-degree curve straight ahead, and I knew at that speed there was no way that we could make it, and keep in mind that the driver was not as messed up as I was, so I don't blame it on him being fucked up. I remember reaching for my seatbelt, but I couldn't find it, and my friend in the back seat screaming, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" and telling him to slow down, but he just stared straight ahead and barely even tried to make the curve. We started flipping down a 30-foot embankment, and we landed sideways, passenger side down, into a flooded creek that I guess would be best described as a swamp. I could tell my face was covered in blood, and it hurt a little when I took a breath, but otherwise I was okay. I called to my friend who had a bad hip from a previous wreck, but he was also okay, except he thought his hip had dislocated again. Unfortunately, the driver wasn't as lucky. He was hanging over me. He was the only one wearing a seatbelt, and he was moaning but otherwise limp. He would try to lift his arm, but it was obvious that his neck had snapped on impact. To be honest, at the time I was calm. Xanax and weed does that, but I was pretty angry at this guy who, in my mind, intentionally just ran us off a bank into a swamp, you know? I had to kick the sunroof out to get out because I smelled gas and was afraid the car would catch fire. I was also lying in about 7 to 8 inches of water. So I got myself out and pulled my friend through the sunroof, and I swear somehow the man in the driver's seat was pulling my friend's leg, which, considering his leg was dislocated from his hip, made him scream in pain. I screamed at him to let him go and told him I would be back for him as soon as I got my friend to safety. I totted my friend away from the car, and we could hear the guy moaning. And about the time I was going back to see how he was, we both heard the moan stop. I got to the car, and I could tell, without feeling for a pulse, that he had passed. We sat down there on the banks of the swamp for a while, trying to figure out what to do next, until the headlights from the car started getting dim from the battery dying, and I knew I had to somehow get us help. Now, we were close to a major highway, but we were surrounded by straight-up kudzu and briar-covered hills that were difficult to scale during the day and damn near impossible at night, especially with whiplash and bruised ribs. I would start up the hill, and my friend would holler for me to not leave him, so I would attempt to carry my friend up the hill, but then he would scream in pain for me to put him down. We did this I don't know how many times, until the battery on the car died completely and we were in the pitch black dark. Despite his pleading for me not to leave him, I had no choice but to climb up and go for help. It took a while, but I finally made it up, seriously hurting from the wreck, but also from the thorns that had torn my arms and legs to shreds. Although I washed my face off in the swamp, I was still bleeding from cuts and a hole in my nose, and I guess that's why 3 cars flew by me instead of stopping to help me. I guess a soaking wet, bloody shirtless guy standing on a rural deserted highway at 3 a.m. could be pretty scary. Finally, a guy I went to high school with stopped to see what was going on, but due to my condition, wouldn't let me inside his truck. So he said he would ride up to the road to where he could get phone service and call 911. A few volunteer firefighters showed up, first followed by an ambulance and a state trooper. I told them what had happened and that the driver had died. They took my friend into the ambulance to the hospital, but I refused treatment. I still wasn't exactly sober, and the state trooper took me back to the bar to get my car. The state trooper was actually extremely cool. He said he used to joyride down that same dirt road when he was a teenager and get high. He told me not to repeat this, but he believed the reason my friend and I lived and the driver died was because we didn't have our seatbelts on and we rolled with the car, whereas the driver's seatbelt had a noose effect on him and caused his neck to snap. A few days later, I learned from the driver in the paper he was 38, successful. Although he was from here, he had lived in Washington, D.C., and he had recently moved back home from Sacramento, California. He even had a couple memorial websites put up after his death, with tributes written from friends all over the country. I think I saw a side of him his friends and family didn't know existed. He definitely had a dark side, which was on display the night he died. I would give his name and links to new stories about the wreck in his tribute pages, but I don't think that'd be fair or appropriate to his family. However, if you just have to know, PM me, and I'll direct you to them. No one who knew him ever contacted me or my friend to find out what happened that night, which I find odd. If it was my loved one who died mysteriously on a rural mountain road in the middle of the night with a carload of strangers, I would definitely try to find out what happened. Maybe they suspected something, and they don't want to know the truth. Strangers kept trying to convince me to get into their car for a cool video. Excuse my horrible storytelling and grammar, but I want to share this story since I've seen a few similar ones around this sub before. I was around 17 when this happened. I was waiting for my boyfriend at the time at Kmart, since I had to go pick some stuff up before our date later that night. It was around 7 p.m., and the store was close to closing, maybe an hour or two left max, and it was pretty empty. I stepped outside, like right outside the door, to wait for him outside, since he was almost there. And since it was raining pretty hard, he was gonna pull his car up. It was just me and 3 women in their 40s and 50s standing outside. They mentioned to me that they were waiting till the rain slowed down and then run to their car. A car that passed by with 3 guys inside of it made sort of a noise towards me. I guess it could be been called a cat call, but I honestly don't really understand what they said at all. And then it circled twice around the parking lot. They parked their car, a young man and around 25 or so got out and approached me at the entrance of the Kmart with an umbrella. He kept trying to make small talk with me, and I was really turned off by it, but I didn't want to tell him to fuck off. So I just kept acting really bored or disinterested. Then he began to ask me a bunch of random questions, like what my name was, where I lived, what school I went to. It kinda automatically came off as red flags to me, so I just lied about all those things. It felt really awkward and invasive, you know? He then began to tell me he and his friends were filming a cool Vine about helping women get to their cars, and that I should let him walk me to my car with his umbrella for their Vine. I told him sorry, I don't have a car, and was hoping he would just leave, but he insisted I still come with him to his car and just pretend it was mine for the Vine. I kept telling him, no, sorry, I can't, but he kept insisting and getting more aggressive, telling me they were trying to film this Vine and that it would be cool. He ended up walking away eventually after continuously trying to get me to go into his car. He got in his car and left, but I noticed they later came back into the parking lot. They had just driven to the other side of the plaza, which was very small, and they circled around Kmart again around 4 to 5 times. The woman next to me looked really startled as the guy left, and they told me, "We wouldn't have let you go with him. That's how girls go missing and never come back home." I'm really thankful the women were there because maybe that deterred him from being more aggressive with me. It just felt so wrong to me the whole time, the way they circled the parking lot, the questions he asked, and his continuous attempts to get me to go into his car on a dark and stormy night. This was probably one of the scariest things that happened to me, and I feel like it sounds overly dramatic, but it's just so scary to me since I'm so small, 5'2", 95 pounds, and it's not like I could really fight back too well. It's really propelled me to take self-defense courses, and now I never stand outside alone or at night in these sort of places or stores. I always stay inside until my ride is already here. He walked over a mile in the freezing rain for me. This story takes place between approximately 2007 and 2009. I lived in a very small town where my mom also grew up and knew almost everyone I encountered either by name or at least by their appearance. I was a pretty precocious youngster and was also involved in gifted and talented programs throughout elementary and high school. Most of my close friends were boys, and 2 to 3 years older than me. And during my freshman year, we all ate lunch with our GT teacher once a week or so. Anyone who wanted to come sit in our discussions was allowed, but we were a close-knit group of dorks, and honestly, I doubt anyone else would have enjoyed it much. One of the boys who I wasn't close with, but knew of, named Randall, came most weeks and sat silently at the back of the room. I learned from my friends that he was a clinger-on, basically helpless in social situations, and often completely absorbed in sci-fi and fantasy worlds, both from books and on his own creation. He also always wore a suit to school, which didn't help him fit in either. My mom knew his parents, and had since confided in me that she was afraid of his dad when they went to school together, and that she wouldn't be surprised if their home life was strained to say the least. Randall was a senior at this time, and had been banned from using school computers after some serious infraction that almost got him expelled. So when anyone else used the computer, he would often stand over their shoulders and watch. The first and only face-to-face interaction I had with him came an awkward moment for me. I had been called into the principal's office with my parents and a teacher I didn't get along with for a conversation about my attitude, and had just come out of the bathroom, where I'd been crying. Randall was standing outside the bathroom and he asked if I was okay, but I didn't really know him and I really didn't feel like talking, so I just nodded, turned my back on him, and went back to class. I, honestly, don't know if that triggered something for him or if it was even earlier, but soon I started to get calls from a number I didn't know every night. I never really liked talking on the phone, and usually I didn't answer, but on the rare occasion that I did, a soft-spoken male voice would say, "Hello, is my name home?" I always hung up without answering, and eventually saved the numbers as do not answer. Some of my friends, our mutual acquaintances, told me that he had a history of fixating on tall blonde girls, especially those involved in extracurricular activities like cheer and dance team. I made the dance team in March. He graduated in May of that year, and I thought I'd heard the end of it. The next school year, although he was supposed to be in a college several states away, I would occasionally leave my final class of the day to see him waiting in the parking lot near my car. I never confronted him about it and would always ask one of my male friends to walk me out. He must have known I was deliberately avoiding him because the calls from Do Not Answer became more frequent and erratic. Examples: heavy breathing left on my voicemail, several calls in a row that didn't ring more than once. On Valentine's Day, He waited for my friend Raina outside the school with a small box of chocolates that she said looked like had been opened and taped back together. She threw it away before I saw it, but I trusted her judgment and laughed it off as a pitiful attempt at a movie-style romance. He also messaged her on Facebook, asking that she procure some of my writing. I fancied myself a poet in high school, so he could have it bound in leather and give it to me as a birthday gift. She refused, but told me about it. I stopped posting poems on Facebook and have not published creative writing online since. Sometime in the summer, my best friend and I got a Facebook friend request from someone with a weird female name. I later found out that he had lifted the name directly from his favorite sci-fi book, so I won't post it here to avoid being totally identifiable. This was when Facebook apps like Top Friends and Honesty Box were still popular, and as soon as we accepted the request, something I'll never do now, but that in 2007 I had no experience with stalkers and thought of most strangers as potential friends. The two of us were their number one and number two friends. We both found this strange, and Raina began a conversation with the account. The person told Raina that she was having a hard time making friends in her state schools, 7 hours from where we lived, but that she had become close with a girl from our high school who had graduated and attended the same college. This account had several friends from our high school, and none from the college she supposedly attended. After a few days, the account became listed as in a relationship with Randall, which everyone found patently absurd and strange. One of the boys who knew Randall well, and who I was also close to, made a call-out post in a Facebook note titled, "Fake female account name is Randall," after which all traces of the fake account were deleted, as was Randall's original profile, which I had blocked when he initially began to call me a year before. He made a new account not long after, and I blocked that one as soon as my friends told me that he had been updating his status within minutes of mine to include the next lyric of whatever song I had posted that day. I let my mom know what was going on, the calls, the waiting outside school, and she called one of her friends on the force. 2 officers went to his house where he lived with his parents and told him that, especially since I was underage and he was not, that he should avoid any further attempts to contact me. Apparently, Randall was enraged. His statuses went from relatively benign Reliant K lyrics to the ravings of someone intent on violence. I don't have any saved screenshots, but I remember reading some of them using Raina's profile and feeling a lump of dread in my stomach that solidified like day-old oatmeal. In hindsight, I have no reasonable explanation for not telling my parents sooner. My mom had friends in law enforcement in our town, and my dad would have gladly beaten his ass. However, I was 15 to 17 while this was happening, with my first serious boyfriend and a brand new driver's license, and I wasn't about to let some creep who couldn't take a hint ruin my precious, already limited freedom. One day during my senior year, while I was exercising said freedom, smoking with my boyfriend at the sketchy park in town, when I got a call from my mom. "Where are you?" she whispered. "I'm in the park, why?" "Just stay there until you hear from me or Dad, okay?" "Okay, Mom. What's up, though?" "Randall is here." "Oh, okay." She hung up. Now, although I was smoking at the park, it wasn't because it was a nice day outside. It was mid-January, and rain and ice were coming down in sheets, had been for days. But you know, teenagers, with their hormones and their penchant for stupid making decisions, I was bound and determined to get high and have sex in the backseat of my car. Bad weather be damned. I mention this, however, because Randall had walked to my house, a mile out of city limits, from his house in the center of town, in the torrential downpour. He knocked on the door, and when my mom answered, he said, "I'm looking for me. We're friends from school, but she's mad at me right now and won't talk to me. She invited him in out of the weather, but he didn't say anything else to her." My mom gave him a ride home in her car and sent the cops to his house again, which was apparently more effective than their first visit, because I never heard from him after that. My dad bought me a taser, which I kept in my car until it expired, and I wasn't allowed to be out of my home without my boyfriend or one of my sisters present until I graduated high school. I did see him a few years ago, working the night shift at my hometown Walmart. I was there to get Redbox movie, but was so shaken just by seeing him walk in that I spent 20 minutes hiding in the floorboard of my car and then sped home movieless. This ending is pretty anticlimactic, but I'm so grateful that my experience wasn't more damaging. I think I had a shield of naive that allowed me to disregard him as a real threat for most of the time that he was fixated on me. Honestly, I considered him much more socially inept than dangerous until he walked more than a mile to my house. How he found my address, I don't know, in an ice storm, just to lie to my mother and catch a glimpse of me. It had been 2 years since our first and only encounter at that point. To this day, I still wonder what compelled him to pursue me so relentlessly when there was never any indication that he was accomplishing anything. Thanks for reading, if you did. I've just wanted to get this off my chest for a long time now.